So, hello. Thank you for joining me today in presenting how innovative gene therapies can redefine cost-effectiveness in managing chronic, expensive diseases. Well, this is me and how I look every day in the lab. Huge lie. But what is true is that I am a biologist by training. I have a master in cancer research and molecular biomedicine and a PhD in molecular medicine. Here is a list of my first author publications and the patent I co-invented. And actually, we have +2 first author publications that came out last week. My main research focuses on developing a novel gene therapy product to treat CMT1A neuropathy. This product gained rare disease and orphan drug designations from the FDA, is protected with a US and a world patent, and allow me to be recognized with many international and local awards. I've been an invited speaker in many conferences, and I'm very proudly ranked among the 40 scientists under 40 years old that impacted CMT research. But thank you. But what's really the problem here? Here we're going to try to address the medical challenge of chronic patients, and that is why. Back in 2020, it was estimated that more than half of US population that are adults have at least one chronic condition, while almost every US citizen above the age of 50 has one or more chronic conditions. If you make that into money, you know that US alone pays $1 trillion per year for trying to manage these patients. And if you extrapolate that for the world and for managing these patients for their lifetime, the numbers are just crazy. I've never seen this kind of trillions in a check before. But what is really scary is that this number is expected to be doubled by 2015. Thankfully, not all chronic patients need the same attention or medical coverage. Here, we're going to focus on patients with chronic degenerative diseases, meaning that in these patients, the affected tissue or organ is progressively worsening in terms of its functionality. Therefore, the goal of the medical community was to reduce disease burden, improve disease pathology, and hence life quality. And how we can make that? To do that, we need efficient and cost-effective treatments. And here is when gene therapies jump in the game. But what really are gene therapies, right? Well, we're not taking genes to the type of therapy you see behind me, but this little DNA strand is actually very right, because I have been trying to change him, and I actually did with great success. But in a more scientific definition, gene therapy describes the delivery of viral or non-viral vehicles that aim to express genetic material that treat a disease by silencing, editing, replacing, or adding a gene. Currently, there are 12 approved gene therapy treatments out in the market that treat different types of blood diseases, cancers, skin diseases, blindness, and a group of neuropathies. Here we are going to very briefly touch gene therapies about hemophilia B, beta thalassemia, and spinal muscular atrophy. So, hemophilia B, it's a hereditary condition that affects 1 in every 25,000 males and results due to the lack of a clotting factor. Hemophilia B patients face very serious disease complications, with the most fatal being intracranial hemorrhage. Thankfully, there are plenty prophylactic and on-demand methods that can manage these patients. But what is unfortunate is that all these methods add up to 44 million per patient, meaning that a hemophilia B patient needs to pay 44 million trying to manage his disease. 2 years ago, and like 1 week ago, 2 novel, one-time-off gene therapy treatments were approved by the FDA. Both of them virally deliver the missing clotting factor to the patients via intravenous injection. So one can pick between these two brands, but what he cannot pick is how much he will pay. Both of them cost $3.5 million for one dose. It's one dose, and you no longer worry about your hemophilia B diagnosis. Remember that managing these patients initially cost about $44 million, so decreasing that by 90% is actually very cost efficient. Moving to a disease that is very relevant in Cyprus, this is beta thalassemia. It affects 1 in every 1,000 Cypriots, while 1 in 7 is a carrier. Beta thalassemia results due to a genetic defect in red blood cells that they do not produce enough hemoglobin, which is the molecule that carries oxygen around our body. So a beta thalassemia patient needs to pay about 11 million trying to manage his disease. If you extrapolate the numbers for the Mediterranean, it's like 1.8 trillion spent trying to manage these patients for their lifetime. Zynteglo came out in the market 2 years ago, and is a one-time-off gene therapy that delivers to these patients the beta-globin gene they miss with intravenous delivery. Zynteglo is 80% cheaper, as it only costs 2.1 million. It's, again, a 2.1 million investment, and you no longer worry about your beta thalassemia diagnosis. It is cost-effective still. Moving from blood diseases to neuropathies, spinal muscular atrophy is the perfect example. This is a genetic disease that results due to the lack of a properly functioning SMN1 gene. This leads to motor neurons that cannot properly connect with muscles. SMA1 patients usually do not survive past the age of 2, and the most common cause of death is respiratory failure. Trying to manage these patients for their 2 years of life cost about 2.7 million. Back in 2019, Zolgensma came out in the market as the one-time-off gene therapy that treats SMA1 patients. Zolgensma costs 2.1 million, and apart from being cost-effective, it's also life-saving, because behind these numbers, there are actual patients. And here is Evelyn from the US and Andonis from Cyprus. They both got the Zolgensma gene therapy, and I can tell you that they have both passed years ago the age of 2. They have improved motor function. Their phenotype is undescribably better than it would be without that treatment. Without Zolgensma, probably neither Evelyn or Andonis would have been with us today. Currently, the Zolgensma team is trying to assess and compare the intravenous delivery with intrathecal delivery as a method to reduce the required dose for efficient results and potentially the costs. Now let's touch the neuropathy that I am working on. This is Charcot-Marie-Tooth type 1A, and it has nothing to do with teeth. It's just the surnames of the 3 doctors that first described it. So CMT results due to the overexpression of a protein, meaning that having less of a protein can be pathogenic, but having more of certain proteins can be equally or even more problematic for a patient. And CMT1A is a perfect example for that. Overexpressed PMP22 in CMT1A patients disturbs the nerve structure and does not allow them to properly communicate with muscle. It was estimated back in 2019 that a CMT1A patient in Germany will pay about 2.2 million trying to manage his disease. And I'm highlighting that this was done back in 2019, and it was focused on German economics because we know, A, that everything is more expensive now, and B, Germany economy does not reflect the world. For example, healthcare in the US is estimated being at least 30% more expensive than in Europe. So this 2.2 million, it's even higher today. We, in collaboration with the Nationwide Children's Hospital from Ohio, US, developed a novel gene therapy treatment that targets the RNA level and prevents the overexpression of PMP22 protein. Our product, quoted here as TVR110, is licensed by Armadus Bio, had gained orphan drug and rare pediatric disease designations from the FDA, and silences PMP22 after intrathecal delivery. We have already shown efficacy and safety in mice and non-human primates, and we had a very successful pre-IND meeting with the FDA. Currently, we're working on IND-enabling studies while also manufacturing a large-scale production of our therapeutic products. We're also in the process of designing our clinical trials that will be a phase 1-2 together. Well, gene therapies are indeed life-changing, and that's why there are about 1,000 active clinical trials focusing on gene therapy treatments. But someone should consider his or her eligibility before trying to take a gene therapy product. By eligibility, we mean age, current disease status, and existence of secondary pathologies. Of course, the earlier the intervention, the greater therapeutic benefit will be, and that's all the reasons why not every single individual will react the same to a gene therapy product. A note that I would also like to make is that gene therapies are not widely available. They are only offered by accredited and very specific number of centers. After briefly touching gene therapies, the take-home message that I wish you to save is that a single dose of a precision gene therapy can improve pathology and life quality of patients. What I share with you today is not just arguments about cost effectiveness. Gene therapies are indeed transformative solutions that benefit the entire society spherically. I will be honest with you, telling that I've been feeling very uncomfortable putting price tags on humans' lives while doing this presentation. But innovative gene therapies are indeed cost-effective, and they do redefine cost-effectiveness in medicine. Gene therapies treat diseases that have been untreatable or even fatal before them. We are all very excited that we're witnessing this transition in medicine, and believe me, this is an exciting era ahead of us. Coming to the end, I wish to thank you for joining me. I wish to thank Reflect for inviting me, and Giga for her guidance while preparing this talk. I wish to thank Elena, the stage manager, and all the tech guys. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank Juliana, who contacted me and made the contact with the Reflect people. So now you know who to blame for whatever you suffered in this room. Is this lady down there, Juliana. Thank you. And you know, it takes a village to make a change. I wish to acknowledge all the gene therapy people that work with me. I'm actually the most junior member of a team of very established and very well-known professionals. I consider us a team that came together to make something greater than the sum of their parts. Thank you, and I would like to take any questions.
Well done, wow.
Thank you.
That's a lot to take in, and really the future. Who has any questions for us, please?
Good afternoon, Marina. So I met you today. I encourage what you are doing, but at the end of the day, you need to have one message to everyone: is what do you want from them? We know about the disease, but we didn't know about you, what you are suffering as a scientific people, and encouraging people to know that you are working in genetic therapy, which is very complicated. I want to know, share with them, what do you want?
Well, if there is something that I want for you is first, know what are gene therapies and embrace every patient with a rare or a common disease. Currently, we're at the stage of Series 1 fundraising. So our product had completed all the preclinical testing. We are ready and off to go for clinical trials as soon as we have the funds to do so. So if there's something for you to ask is, have gene
Any
therapies,
investors out there?
have gene therapies in your investment plan.
Any more questions? Anyone else for a question?
Thank you for the presentation. So, are insurance brokers incentivized to consider gene therapy investment, or they rather benefit from having a patient with chronic disease?
I didn't hear the first part.
Yeah, so are insurance brokers incentivized to approach like gene therapy, or they vice versa have certain incentives to like deal with like
Well, at the moment in the US, there are insurance companies that cover gene therapies under certain criteria. So A, they need to be sure that you meet the criteria we said before, meaning that you will be indeed benefited from a gene therapy product. And they also have some very specific negotiations with the company offering the product, meaning how the payment installments will be done. So, yeah.
Anybody else?
Hi, Marina. Thank you for the presentation. I am a patient advocate of Cyprus patients for a rare disease called Ahius. I don't know if you're aware of it. I would like to ask, having experienced from the patient side, how they feel and how difficult it is to obtain government support on treatments, etc. And the problem we have often with insurances to cover the expenses. Are there any possible side effects in the short term or long term from these gene therapies?
Well, that's a very good question. You know that the first gene therapy was approved back in 2019, but it has been clinically tested years before that, and that's why we have all these clinical trials set. We know that there are vehicles that are already accredited and safe, so they have been long tested and proved safe. So if you choose one of those vehicles to deliver your therapy, you covered the vehicle toxicity part. And then, as far as the very specific product that is encapsulated in these vehicles, there are very extensive and very strict regulations that you need to pass. So I would feel safe testing and using a vehicle that has been already tested and validated for years, and a product that's been extensively screened by FDA.
Well, thank you very much for a lovely talk.
Thank you all. Ah, yeah.
One more. Oh, of course.
Thank you. This might be a little more technical question. What if someone, regarding thalassemia, what if someone has normal or even above normal, like 6.5 to 7.2 million red blood cells, but is thinner? How can, like smaller?
There are also different type of blood diseases that might not be thalassemia that will have this type of shape of red blood cells, and that could be like sickle cell anemia, so that would be a different treatment. And there are gene therapies produced out there. So you really need to be very specific about what's the pathology and what's the cause of it. So if it's like thalassemia, then it's not thalassemia. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marina. Please stick around, everybody. Our next